Billionaire discovers ex-lover and twins texting for shelter in the cold. An amazing transformation unfolds. Jake Thompson stood behind a plate glass window overlooking the Chicago skyline, the crisp winter air biting as it swirled outside. Inside his penthouse office, the atmosphere felt sterile, a blinding brilliance, sleek surfaces, and the hum of city life below. Yet, despite the opulence, he felt the isolation creeping in, as it often did. His phone vibrated violently on the mahogany desk, cutting through the ambient chatter of the bustling ballroom. He glanced down and froze. "Jake, please, the storm, I'm scared, the boys." It was Sarah, his long-forgotten high school sweetheart, the girl whose laughter echoed through the hallways of his memories. A world away, aside from a life brimming with wealth and success, here was a struggling single mother reaching out, desperately grasping for something, anything that could bring her shelter. He swallowed hard, feeling an unsettling pang of nostalgia mixed with guilt. Around him, elite investors laughed and clinked glasses, discussing venture capital and market potential, oblivious to the growing storm that raged beyond the glass. His heart thudded in his chest. He had crafted his life with unrelenting focus, built an empire upon sacrifice. Yet now he hesitated. The image of her boys, small, innocent, trapped and frightened, filled his mind. Could he extend an invitation, jeopardizing the carefully cultivated facade he had meticulously built? Before he could second-guess himself, Jake punched in a text. "You can stay here for a few nights, safe from the storm." Satisfying? Not quite. More like a guilty Band-Aid on a gaping wound. What was he doing? He was a billionaire, a powerhouse in the tech industry, not a knight in shining armor. The room's laughter felt more distant now, the poised smiles turning into masked faces of judgment as whispers floated his way. "Jake, why are you wasting time on that?" one colleague mockingly quipped, eyes flitting with condescension. The needling voices of his glamorous world felt suffocating. As he waited, anxiety twisted like a storm in his gut. The doorbell finally echoed. When he opened it, the world inside his immaculate penthouse shifted. The chaos of reality poured in. A haggard Sarah, twin boys bundled in layers too big for their tiny frames. In an instant, the icy expanse of his wealth felt cruel against their palpable vulnerability. "Jake," she murmured, her voice a mix of disbelief and hesitant hope. He couldn't ignore the way the boys looked at him, wide-eyed and uncertain. In that moment, Jake recognized a flicker within him, repressed and dusty, the desire to mentor, to nurture. He saw one of the boys fiddling with an old coding manual, and something sparking deep inside him twisted uneasily with excitement. Yet the stark disparity of their lives against his own gnawed at him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every passing moment, the laughter from the ballroom felt sharper, dissecting his decision into bitter pieces. Sarah bravely attempted to create a sense of normalcy for her twins, narrating tales from their old neighborhood, yet they were tales filled with stumbles through crumbling streets. A cold realization washed over him. His very own company might have contributed to their struggle, decisions made in boardrooms trickling down to anyone but him. Jake's heart raced. Could the victories he celebrated be built upon the backs of families like theirs? Tension knotted in his chest, thoughts frantic. Just as he resolved to confront his past actions, leaving the glitzy facade behind, a nerve-wracking call disrupted his resolve. A voice, a familiar corporate adversary, threatened to expose them, revealing why Sarah had turned to him in such desperation. Jake stood, caught between lights and shadows, between privilege and morality. He could feel the weight of the world pressing against him, a tempest brewing inside, every moment pushing him closer to a conflict he could no longer ignore. What would he do? And could he muster the courage to fight for Sarah and her boys while risking everything he had built? Jake stood frozen at the threshold of his penthouse, the chill of the storm mirrored by an internal tempest. The laughter and clinking glasses faded from his consciousness, replaced by the urgency radiating from Sarah's worried expression.
Two pairs of small eyes, round and glossy with uncertainty, tugged at the fibers of his heart. "I can't believe you really came for us," Sarah whispered, biting her lip. Her frailty struck him, not just as a mother, but someone who once danced in the warmth of his life. Her vulnerability, it filled the room. The boys, Robert and Lucas, dashed toward the warmth of the fireplace, feet skittering across the polished floor. Each step they took reminded Jake of the substantial chasm between their worlds. Behind layers of his affluence lay shadows he inadvertently cast, shadows that now loomed over them all. Feeling the weight of his own failures, he stepped away from the entryway and approached Sarah. "What happened?" The question slipped from his lips before he could mask his genuine concern. The floodgates opened as Sarah struggled to recount the difficulties that led her to this moment.
A job lost, bills piling up, and an increasingly unstable living situation threatened to drown her. Each word she uttered was heavy with adherence to survival, yet simultaneously it held the bittersweet memory of their past. It struck him again. His success had gained him everything economically, but had detached him from the emotional connections that once defined him. And the coding manual? He gestured towards Robert, whose small fingers delicately handled the worn pages, disconnected from the precise algorithmic world Jake harnessed every day. Sarah's gaze softened. "He loves computers, just like you did. He saw you once in an article." Jake's chest tightened. The gravitational pull was undeniable. He was on the precipice of rediscovering himself, perhaps even redefining what success meant. The chance to channel his expertise anew, to teach, to inspire. His mind whirled with possibilities, yet also shivered with the heat of impending disaster. The phone call loomed over him, the possibility of exposure, the threat directed at Sarah and her boys twisted a knife deep. He could very well lose everything. "I'll help you." The confidence in his voice was shaky, dictated by emotion rather than cynical strategy. He owed it to them, to Sarah. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, the shadows dissipated. "Are you serious?" "Yes, but I need honesty," he said apprehensively. "What do you need?" Jake had always been about solutions, swift, calculated, and often ruthless. But now, standing in front of people who needed him, willing to embrace vulnerability, felt exhilarating. It sparked something inside him as he leaned towards Sarah's emotional burdens, their shared history now becoming a bridge to potential redemption. He envisioned mentoring Robert and Lucas, integrating their love for technology into practical skills that could empower them. Fear flickered within him. Could he really balance their lives with his own? He'd face opposition, both from corporate adversaries and the disillusioned peers still waiting for him to slip. As he watched the awe settle into the twins' expressions, excitement electrified his nerve endings. He needed to act fast. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a different storm brewed, his desire for atonement mingling with dread over what lay ahead. There were pressures. Decisions loomed. Gathering his resolve, Jake flipped his phone over and glanced at the notifications floating ominously on the screen. His spirit stiffened with a mix of determination and anxiety as it dawned on him this was the moment to forge a different path. Confrontation was inevitable. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from the adversary, a taunting reminder of the stakes. Could he navigate the tumultuous waters ahead, both in his professional sphere and within this fledgling life's purpose? Could he shelter Sarah and the boys without risking everything he had worked tirelessly to build? As he prepared to face the storm outside, Jake grappled with his choices, every heartbeat reminding him that his world was about to shift irrevocably. The time had come to face everything he thought he believed. Jake's thoughts spiraled as he observed the flickering fire casting shadows across the room. The warmth offered by the flames was almost alien after the chill of the storm outside. Underneath that warmth, however, a stark reality sat heavy on his chest. Each decision he made from that moment forward could have irreparable consequences for Sarah, for her boys, and for himself. This wasn't just about offering help. It was about redirecting his life's path entirely. "Let's get you settled in," he said finally, his voice a touch steadier than moments before.
The urgency in Sarah's eyes urged him to reclaim his footing. He motioned toward the couch, eyeing the makeshift home his penthouse could create for them. The bleakness of their circumstances weighed heavily on him. After years of skyscraper views and corner offices, it was easy to forget what true vulnerability felt like. As the boys busily unpacked toys from a battered box, Jake turned his attention back to Sarah. "I want to help you find a job, something stable. We can work on skills for Robert and Lucas too, like programming or design. It could give them a solid foundation." Seeing the flicker of hope in her expression ignited something within him, an almost forgotten sense of purpose. It was a stark contrast to the cutthroat deals and cold exchanges that had become his daily existence. The revelation was jarring yet refreshing. He had the tools to empower others in a way he never had before. "What about you?" Sarah asked, a shadow creeping back into her eyes. A knot formed in his stomach. I'll manage. I have a company to run. But this feels different. Maybe it's a chance for me to focus on something that actually matters." Though the words left his mouth, doubt clawed at his mind. What did matter mean anymore? He needed to find a balance between his burgeoning desire to foster these young lives and the relentless world of business that demanded his attention. He opened a laptop he had left on the coffee table, the glow illuminating his thoughts. "Let's see what resources are out there," he said, determined. It would be a challenge to juggle both responsibilities. But would it be worth it? The prospect of influencing Robert and Lucas's futures ignited a fire deep within him. He no longer wanted to be just a figure with wealth. He craved to guide, to mold. And yet, just as his enthusiasm began to swell, another notification chimed on his phone, the ominous reminder of his corporate adversities. Silencing the device, he felt sweat trickle down his back. It was a delicate balance. Would he risk everything he had built to construct a new identity, one woven with purpose and integrity?
As he navigated websites looking for resources, his mind raced through possible repercussions from his company for stepping away. Conversations he had dismissed as trivial now took on weightier significance. They echoed back to him, warning him not to get too close to the flames. "Why the sudden focus on teaching?" Sarah asked. Her curiosity piqued, but her brow furrowed with concern. "You've always been about business." Jake paused. "Maybe I'm finally understanding how hollow that can be." The admission hung in the air, raw and unprocessed. It scared him. The warmth of the room settled upon him, and he recognized a newfound resolve anchoring him. He would walk a tightrope between his corporate obligations and a commitment to help Sarah and her children. But in that tension, perhaps, lay the key to something transformative. As he processed the juxtaposition of his worlds, a thought struck him. There was someone he needed to confront, someone who held the key to navigating this storm. The lingering threat reminded him. The challenge ahead was intertwined with those turbulent corporate connections. If he wanted to forge this new identity, he would first have to deal with his past. "Sarah," he said, his voice steadying, "I need to reach out to someone from the company. It's time to face my demons." The clock ticked ominously in the silence that followed, a reminder that decisions loomed closer than he realized. With a deep breath, Jake settled his gaze on the laptop screen, determined to take the first step into the unknown. Jake's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the weight of his decision pressing down like a heavy fog. As the notifications faded into the background, his mind drifted toward the implications of his next move. He had spent the last decade climbing the corporate ladder, carving a niche with ruthless strategies and calculated risks. Yet here he was, ready to reach out not to secure another deal, but to confront the very roots of his discontent. With each moment that passed, Jake wrestled with the growing discomfort lodged in his throat. He opened his messaging app, hesitating. Who could he trust? The company was a minefield where loyalty felt like a fading relic, but he had to reach out. Not for himself, not for Sarah, but to understand his own limits and establish new boundaries. His fingers finally tapped out a message to Clara, a former colleague whom he had always considered a whisper of a friend amidst the corporate grind. "Clara, can we meet? I need to talk." The instant after he hit send, a wave of anxiety surged through him. Was this really the right step? Thoughts spiraled. She could easily report back to the upper management, and he could lose what little influence he had left. Yet, as he contemplated those risks, he recognized that he wasn't the person he had been yesterday. He had chosen to break away from the relentless pursuit of profit, and now he needed to gather intelligence that was essential for shaping his new path. "Jake?" Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts, pulling him back to the buzzing reality in the room. "Are you all right?" She approached with a concerned expression, the veil of hope still shimmering in her gaze. Her presence grounded him. The life lessons he would be imparting to Robert and Lucas felt intertwined with the emerging teacher in himself. "I will be," he assured her, though the tremor in his voice belied the conviction of his words. "What did you decide?" she asked, watching him closely, as if reading the lines etched on his face. "Just reaching out for some support, people I can trust," he replied cautiously. He didn't want to overwhelm her with the ails of his corporate struggles yet. "That's a good start," she said, nodding, her face lighting with that flicker of belief he had seen moments before. It served as a gentle reminder of why he hadn't chosen to let those corporate chains bind him entirely. Jake shifted back to the laptop, determined to find resources that could liberate Sarah's family while forging a new connection with his own values. The flickering fire danced in the background, casting shadows that mimicked the uncertainties of his past and future. As he began drafting a skills program for the boys, laying out beginners courses on programming, design, and perhaps even financial literacy, an image of a future where they could thrive began to form in his mind. He realized that this endeavor was about more than just providing employment. It was about empowering them to dream bigger than the confines of their current situation. He could impart his knowledge, guiding them toward a brighter landscape. Yet, with every keystroke, unease gnawed at him. What if the confrontation with Clara led him back into the pressure cooker of his old life? Would the thrill of manipulation and power lure him back like a moth to a flame? Or would he forge ahead, more mindful of the path he was creating not only for himself, but for these children who deserved better? An incoming message interrupted his reverie. It was Clara. When and where? The time had come to face the unseen adversaries hidden by boardroom doors. Jake felt the tension mount in his chest, knowing each word exchanged would carry the potential to shatter his carefully constructed facade. He took a deep breath, standing at the precipice of two worlds, one defined by cold corporate ambitions and the other offering warmth and purpose. With resolve strengthening in his core, he typed back, "Tomorrow, at our old cafe. It's time to talk." As the message sent, a gnawing realization dawned. The transformation he craved would not come without chaos. The clock ticked again, the hands moving relentlessly forward. Tomorrow would be a trial of sorts, a test of newfound convictions against the embers of his former life. Would he emerge ignited with clarity or consumed by the very flames he intended to extinguish? Victory or defeat, he was stepping into the unknown. Jake stared at the pixelated cursor on his screen as the morning light broke through the blinds. The anticipation of meeting Clara mingled with the fear curling in his stomach, creating a tension that felt almost unbearable. He had spent too long fabricating a persona designed to navigate the treacherous waters of the corporate world, but the man he had become was now at odds with the man he wanted to be. As he reflected on the forthcoming meeting, he pulled up the draft of the skills program he had explored the night before. Each line seemed more promising than the last, a foundation upon which he could build a world for Robert and Lucas that transcended the shackles of their environment. In those moments of contemplating their futures, his resolve began to crystallize. He wanted to be the catalyst of change, not just for himself, but for those boys who deserved better opportunities than what had been handed down through their life circumstances. The clock ticked closer to the hour of his meeting with Clara. Thoughts raced through his mind. How could he convey the urgency of his transformation without exposing his vulnerabilities? What did he hope to gain from her perspective? A voice spoke within him, asking if asking for help was a weakness or a strength. He could almost feel the weight of the industry's judgment hanging over him like an unseen puppet master, pulling at strings he desperately tried to choke. The facade of confidence began to feel suffocating as he looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Jake knew he needed to project a semblance of determination. But who was he kidding? The doubts lingered. What if Clara saw through him? Would she call his bluff and reveal the cracks in his new resolve? The cafe was just down the block, a place woven into their shared history, filled with late-night strategy discussions and careless laughter.
He could almost smell the aroma of fresh coffee and pastries, those little indulgences that reminded him of simpler times. Yet even sweet memories turned bitter, and he steeled himself for the upcoming candid exchange. He understood now that this was not merely about reconnecting with Clara, it was about confronting the lingering pieces of himself he had yet to confront. As he entered the cafe, the hustle and bustle inside enveloped him, drowning out the nagging fears that haunted him just moments before. Scanning the room, he spotted Clara seated at a familiar corner table, her brow furrowed in concentration as she looked over a notepad. There she was, a reminder of a time when survival was easier, less complex. Jake took a breath, working to steady the nerves gripping his insides. "Clara," he greeted as he approached, attempting to infuse his voice with warmth.
"Jake," she replied, looking up at him, a mixture of relief and skepticism painting her expression. "Thanks for reaching out." They exchanged pleasantries before settling into a dialogue that quickly evolved into something more meaningful. Jake found himself revealing far more than he had intended, discussing his newfound purpose, the skills program for the boys, and the pressure of navigating the hallways of their former workplace. Each word felt like a release, the rawness of it mingling with vulnerability that had long been buried beneath layers of corporate armor. "Are you afraid?" Clara asked suddenly, biting into her croissant, her eyes never leaving his. He paused, taken aback, as if he had been caught unguarded. The question struck deeper than the surface of their conversation. Fear? Yes, it represented the uncertainty of this new path, the fear of failure, and the terror of losing the only identity he had ever known. But the burgeoning sense of purpose ignited within him felt like a different kind of fuel, one that whispered promises of better days. "Every single day," Jake admitted, a weight lifting from his chest. "But I want to change that. I want to do it for Robert and Lucas." Clara nodded, a hint of admiration crossed her features. "Not everyone can make that jump, you know?" Jake met her gaze with a newfound determination. Maybe it's not just a jump. Maybe it's a series of steps. The discussion morphed into shared memories, realizations, and an unexpected unity in purpose as Clara began to share her own aspirations, dreams trapped beneath the strain of corporate loyalty. But then Clara's expression shifted, her eyes suddenly grounded, tracing the contours of the cafe as if searching for something. "So what's the next step then?" Jake felt the question more from curiosity to challenge. The urgency in her voice sparked something primal within him, the realization that the dialogue had moved beyond personal reflection into a professional reckoning. He felt the corners of his mouth twitch upwards as he answered, his voice steadying. "We both need to pull the curtain back on our fears and confront the choices we've been avoiding. It's time to think bigger." Clara regarded him, a flicker of shared excitement lighting her eyes. Just then Jake understood that this encounter would indeed alter their trajectories. There was clarity found in vulnerability. As he pondered their next moves, the cafe around them faded, and Jake's world expanded with possibilities. But he could not shake the feeling that their truths were merely stepping stones toward uncovering the more profound mysteries at play. The air shifted, tension brewing quietly around them, hinting that the confrontation with their past decisions was far from over. What would Jake confront next, not only in Clara, but within himself? The taste of chaos lingered, a faint promise that clarity would come at a price. Jake sat in the cafe, the remnants of the conversation lingering in the air like echoes of a distant storm. Clara's question about the next step had unsettled him in a way he hadn't anticipated. The thought of progress had been exhilarating, yet the realization of the daunting path ahead sat heavy in his mind. It was one thing to aspire for change. It was another to sift through the tangled roots of a life spent in a corporate jungle. He could feel his grip tightening around the steaming cup of coffee, warmth seeping into his fingers. This moment, nestled in the comfortable ambiance of the cafe, felt like a thin veneer above an abyss of uncertainty. "Jake?" Clara's voice pierced the fog, returning him to the present. "What's next for you? You didn't answer my question." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I need to lay the groundwork for the skills program," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "That's my immediate priority, the first step in breaking free." Clara leaned in, her curiosity evident. "And how exactly do you plan to implement it? You know the resistance you might face, not just from your previous profession, but internally." Internal resistance? The phrase clung to him. The more he thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. He had been the architect of his own neglect,
shackled by the security that came with familiarity. I am aware of the risks. Each move will have to be calculated. I will need a team, people who believe in the vision, and I'll have to convince them they're worth the investment. Clara studied him, her brows knitting together. Investing in talent requires vulnerability. Are you willing to put yourself in a position where you could be let down? The question struck again. Jake felt as if the very foundation he was attempting to build was being challenged. He wrestled with the fear of opening himself to others, the potential of disappointment suffocating him. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough to lead them? Or what if you succeed? Clara fired back, a hint of intensity in his voice that sent a jolt through him. You're not leading only for yourself. You're doing it for Robert and Lucas. They're depending on you to make something better. Her words ignited a flicker of motivation buried beneath self-doubt. The boys were his compass, the reason he was digging through the rubble of his past to find something worth building upon. But the weight of expectations, both external and internal, threatened to push him back into a familiar darkness. What if the boys don't see me as a leader? His voice fell a notch, the vulnerability cutting through the bravado he had built. What if I mess it all up? Then you mess it up, Clara shrugged, her expression softening. But the difference between someone who leads and someone who follows is the acceptance of failure as part of the journey. You need to give yourself permission to be imperfect. A silence settled between them, pregnant with realization. Her perspective was akin to a key unlocking a door he had always kept barred. I can't keep living behind a facade, he whispered, words barely escaping his lips. If I want to be a catalyst for change, I need to own my past, accept my flaws, and push forward. I have to be real. Clara smiled, not in pity, but in recognition. Exactly. Being real isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. That is what will resonate with them. They'll see your struggles, and they'll relate to that. He took that in, the flickering flame of determination igniting within him again. All right, I'll start by reaching out to some contacts. He nodded, the next steps beginning to crystallize in his mind. I'll need people who are aligned with the vision, people willing to take this leap with me. Good, Clara said, genuine encouragement flickering in her eyes. And don't forget, you're not alone in this. I might have my own journey, but I'm here to support yours. Her presence felt like a lifeline, assurance surging through him as he mulled over the realization that his journey was not just his own. He would no longer face these obstacles in isolation. The conversation shifted, patiently unraveling their accumulated fears into actionable insights, but as the hours melted away, Jake emerged with a clearer vision for his life beyond the corporate maze. Yet a nagging thought lingered. How many unfamiliar faces could he trust to step forward with him? As they walked out of the cafe, a chill wound its way through the air, mingling with the excitement of the road ahead. Jake turned to Clara. This might just be the beginning, but I know it's going to be hectic. Good, she smiled, eyes sparkling with the anticipation of a challenge. Embrace the chaos. It will be part of your story. They parted ways, but the resolve inside Jake remained unyielding. In the days that followed, he began to plot out each meeting and message like a soldier preparing for battle. But clawing through his own mind, thousands of questions awaited him. Would he find the right allies? Would he uncover the courage still hidden beneath years of ingrained doubt? The moment loomed closer for him to step back into that world, a world that had once shaped him, but now felt foreign. As he clicked away at his keyboard, constructing emails filled with hope and tentative steps, a fear nagged deeper than ever. Uncertainty whispered that it was not only others he had to convince of his cause, but himself as well. Jake sat at his kitchen table, the overhead light casting a stark glow on the chaos of papers before him. Each page was a potential connection, each email a step into an unknown future. He wanted to transform his thoughts into action, yet doubt loomed like a thick fog, stifling his clarity. The stakes felt monumental. He was no longer just plotting a course for himself, he was forging a path for others who might follow. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Beneath the surface of optimism, a current of anxiety churned. Each name on his contact list represented either a potential ally or a source of potential rejection. Would they dismiss his efforts, labeling them naive? Or worse, would they see through him and decide he was just another corporate dropout with a fleeting passion? With a deep breath, he reminded himself of Clara's words. Vulnerability was part of authenticity, and authenticity was essential for true leadership. Drawing on this mental mantra, he began crafting an invitation for a meeting.
The first step was reaching out to seasoned professionals, people who shared his vision for a skills program that would redefine their industry. His vision was bold. It promised growth and collaboration, but the words felt slippery, difficult to articulate precisely how he envisioned the execution. The faint sound of his children in the next room broke his concentration, and he paused, absorbing the reminder of why he was pushing into this uncertain territory. Robert and Lucas, they were the anchors not just to his present, but to his potential future. He couldn't afford to waver when the impact of his decision stretched beyond himself. After another moment of hesitation, he typed out a subject line: Collaborative Opportunity, Skills Development Program. It felt like a leap off a cliff, catching air in between. He needed some semblance of a team, a safety net, to pull him through the exhilarating plunge. Once sent, he stared blankly at the screen, heart racing. It was done. There was no going back. Though uncertainty gripped him, a twinge of exhilaration coursed through his veins as well. The first tactical move had been made. The battle had officially begun. The tides of change momentarily shifted in his favor. Jake decided to phone a former colleague, Sarah. They had shared mutual respect and admiration during their years together, and she had an established reputation in their field. If anyone could grasp what he was trying to achieve, it was her. It was a calculated risk, but this time he would blindfold himself to self-doubt and jump into action. "Hey, Sarah, it's Jake," he started, his own voice surprising him with its steadiness. They exchanged pleasantries before he delved into what he envisioned. As he spoke, he felt as though the words poured from some deep well inside him, unyielding. Sarah listened with interest. He could hear her engagement in every pause and interjection. "Jake, this sounds ambitious," she said thoughtfully, "but I think you have the makings of a solid foundation. Let's discuss how I might be able to support you." Relief flooded over him, whispering of possibilities. Cold embers of self-doubt seemed to evolve into flickering flames of hope. Although the journey was still ripe with challenges, he discovered that facing one person, opening that line of communication, had already shifted his perspective. As the conversation turned to logistics and strategies, Jake felt the weight of the world slowly lift. Here, in this moment of back and forth, he was not alone. He was redefining his role, not just as a former corporate leader, but as a budding innovator. But beneath the swell of positivity, shadows lurked. Sarah's interest could flicker into something genuine, but would it last? Would the connection endure when faced with the realities of presenting a radical idea to an industry set in its ways? When he hung up, a newfound resolve surged within him. The next steps felt clearer now, yet the question simmered ominously. How many more calls would it take to convert a flicker of interest into a full blaze of support? The stakes were high, and the lion's den awaited him. Gritting his teeth, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. The thought of reaching out further climbed back into his mind, each name representing another bridge to be built, but that meant stepping outside his comfort zone yet again. He glanced at the clock. Dawn was on the horizon, a metaphor that pulled him forward. With each tick, a formidable truth loomed. Soon would come the moment he would have to face the professionals who thrived in the structure he once trusted. Could he challenge the system they had all upheld, even in his own mind, and advocate for a vision that demanded vulnerability and trust? The encounter was inevitable. The time was drawing near. Jake realized he must now confront not just the industry, but the specter of his own past entanglements. The sun crept lazily above the horizon, reluctantly filling Jake's kitchen with light. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma stirring a sense of urgency within him. The challenges he faced loomed larger than ever, the initial exhilaration of Sarah's interest tempered by the realization that time was not on his side. He took a sip, reflecting on how he needed to reignite that fiery resolve he'd felt during their conversation, yet he could sense the insidious creep of self-doubt edging back in. His phone buzzed on the table, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a notification from his email, an interested response from his first outreach. Swallowing hard, Jake opened the message. Excitement crashed into anxiety as he read the words. It was a thank you for his initiative, but with it came a litany of reservations. The sender held a respected position in the industry, but they conveyed skepticism about the feasibility of his program. The well-articulated criticisms poked at the vulnerabilities he felt naked to expose. Was he merely a dreamer, lost in overconfidence? As he set the phone down, the biting sting of doubt ricocheted through him.
Those critical voices, the murmurs from within, festered, threatening to drown out the support he had recently garnered. It prompted him to question, was he capable of pushing through the judgments and perceptions that had once defined his professional landscape?
Refusing to let the email kill his momentum, Jake opened a blank document on his laptop and began writing down the ideas that swirled in his head. He outlined the program's advantages, emphasizing its potential to reshape outdated industry practices. The more he documented his thoughts, the clearer the vision became. He wasn't just advocating for a change, he was laying out a roadmap for a better future. Yet a sense of isolation crept in. He needed more voices, more validation. The weight of responsibility bore down heavily on him. It wasn't just about his ambition, but also the family who depended on the success of this venture. A sense of urgency gripped him as he began surfing through his contact list again, searching for anyone he could approach for additional critiques or support. Moments later, he found himself dialing another number. This time it was Kenneth, a bold strategist with whom Jake had often debated in the corporate trenches. If anyone could challenge his concept constructively, it was Kenneth. The call connected, and the familiar voice greeted him, but Jake felt an immediate wave of reluctance wash over him. "Jake, what's up?" Kenneth inquired, his tone jovial and relaxed. "Hey, I need your opinion on something. I'm launching a skills development program, and I could use a critical eye. I need honesty here, no sugarcoating." "Sure, I'm game. What's the pitch?" As Jake lay out his vision, Kenneth listened intently, punctuating his silence with thoughtful hums. It felt invigorating to articulate the core of his idea, each word building upon the last. When Jake finished, there was a pause, a deafening silence filled with tension. "Okay, I'll bite," Kenneth began cautiously. "Your heart is in the right place, but these ideas, they're risky. Are you ready for the backlash that might come from the execs who will view this as a threat?" Jake clenched his teeth. "I thought you'd help, not throw water on the fire." "Easy, it's what I do. I'm challenging you because I believe feedback isn't just a nicety, it's a necessity in leading change." Kenneth's words rattled inside him. The cold reality of the corporate structure he was trying to dismantle hit him squarely in the chest. The industry was insular, resistant to change. Yet that fire ignited anew within him. This wasn't a time for retreat, but for relentless pursuit. He ended the call still simmering from the conversation. The criticism had stung, but it also solidified his resolve. He had to face these contradictions head on. Jake knew he had to address the likelihood of pushback in his next communications. His tasks were now clear: fortify his plan, seek out allies who could provide counterweights to the potential naysayers, and lean on Sarah's support to navigate the industry landscape. In the quiet aftermath, he glanced at the digital clock. Time was slipping away, and one thought emerged potent and unwavering. He would seize every opportunity to build not only an innovative program, but also a coalition of thinkers willing to embrace friction for growth. The inevitable reality was dawning. Testing his vision would involve conflict, the kind that exposed his character, challenged his foundational beliefs, and ultimately demanded that he stand unyielding in his convictions. His heart pounded with anticipation at the thought. The time had come to face the institutional barriers. But the pressing question was clear. When he stood at the battleground, would he stumble at the entrance, or would he blaze a trail forward into the fray? The breakfast dishes lay untouched in the sink as Jake returned to his laptop, the flicker of the screen illuminating his determined expression. He knew he needed to structure his approach. Drawing on Kenneth's skepticism, he began crafting a comprehensive presentation, segmenting it into potential obstacles, counterarguments, and solutions. Perhaps it was not just about his program, but about fostering a dialogue, igniting curiosity rather than defensiveness. As he assembled bullet points, his mind raced through memories of his early career, the thrill of fresh ideas, the palpable energy in the air during brainstorming sessions that transformed mere concepts into reality. Those days had taught him the importance of compelling communication and the delicate art of persuasion. He needed to recapture that same energy, that infectious enthusiasm which once drew people to his vision. What he'd failed to see in Kenneth's critique was the fraction of truth worth embracing. Not everyone would jump on board immediately. Chastising himself for dwelling in negativity, he forged ahead with determination. However, a nagging thought lingered. Had he lost that magnetic quality of his early days? He recalled a mentor who had once said,
charm is not in the presentation, but in presence. With a deep breath, he pushed those doubts back down. Jake was here to reclaim his presence. After hours of focused work, he strode to his bedroom, the walls plastered with remnants of his former self, awards, accolades, photographs that narrated tales of victories. He caught his gaze in the mirror and marveled at how he'd let his confidence erode beneath tribal corporate priorities. It was time to trace back to who he was before all the accolades clamped down upon him. Today, he was making a conscious pivot. He would not allow himself to become just another cog in the wheel. In the pocket of his bag, his fingers grazed Sarah's contact information. She was not merely interested in his project, she believed in him as a person. With renewed purpose, Jake sent her a message requesting a moment to meet. If he could articulate his vision to her, he could conquer the doubts that plagued him.
Sarah's feedback would not only solidify his plans, but also fortify him emotionally against the turmoil that might follow. Minutes turned into hours as he paced under the dim sheen of the living room light, eager to call her, but hesitant with doubts creeping back. Would she still have faith in him after the skeptics had voiced their concerns? Would he find the right words? Eventually, he sat back down, took another look through his presentation, and successfully reached a conclusion. Vulnerability, in all its forms, might be the ultimate bridge to building understanding. If he could open up to her about his fears, juxtaposing them against his ambitions, perhaps she could help him refine his approach. It was a risk, but when had he ever shied from risk? As he pulled up his saved draft of the presentation, he began to articulate his thoughts into a passionate narrative, one that mirrored the struggles he had with self-doubt and the ambition he held tightly to change the status quo. The stakes felt astonishingly high. What if he could inspire others to believe in his vision, to see the potential buried beneath layers of corporate skepticism? His phone buzzed again, startling him from his focused reverie. It was a message from Sarah, confirming their meeting for later that week. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was tinged with anticipation. He was preparing for a serious discussion, one potentially infused with both encouragement and harsh truths. Now standing at this intersection of self-discovery and professional reawakening, his thoughts swirled with unresolved questions. If Sarah believed him, could he ultimately convince the industry too? As the clock ticked, he made a pledge to harness the value of each critique, letting it smell like fuel rather than fear. But at the same time, uncertainty loomed large. Was he ready to confront the inevitable pushback from the establishment? Would this journey strip him bare and expose insecurities he had stifled? The tension was palpable as Jake prepared for this intersection of his past and future. The moment had arrived to convey this turbulent blend of resolve and vulnerability that could either build the path forward or leave him standing alone in the cold. He clenched his fists, preparing to plunge into the uncertain waters, hopeful that passion, backed by reason and support, might just prove stronger than institutional inertia. And as he stared at his draft, one thought burned through sharply. What if facing the institution meant confronting a greater enemy within himself? Jake sat in his office, the shades drawn against the vibrant Chicago skyline, feeling the weight of his choices compress around him. Today felt different. Uncertainty had been replaced by clarity. After days of grappling with self-doubt, battling cynicism from former colleagues, and rehearsing for difficult conversations, he was ready. The skills development program that had once felt like a distant ambition now thrummed with urgency. His resolve to empower Robert and Lucas generated an inner strength that he had yet to fully appreciate. The seeds of his transformation had taken root, evolving from a simple desire to help into a profound need to redefine what success meant, not just for him, but for everyone around him. He glanced down at the meticulously organized notes in front of him and felt a rush of confidence. Every bullet point outlined not just a proposal, but a revolution. Gone were the days of satisfying shareholders and chasing abstract metrics of wealth. He was aiming for something more substantive, impact. Instead of running away from the accountability his corporate life had stifled, he would confront it head-on. Jake typed out an invitation to a meeting with key stakeholders, including Clara, Sarah, and a few other progressive thinkers he had cautiously reached out to in recent days. He felt the rush of adrenaline as he clicked send.
This wasn't merely an invitation, it was a declaration destined to reshape his professional landscape. With the email dispatched, Jake opened a new tab and perused resources for entrepreneurs advocating social impact. He remembered Sarah's voice encouraging him to balance empathy with profit. He realized this wouldn't be easy. There were obstacles ahead, but the thought of collaborating with others ignited a fire within him. In the subsequent days, he met with Sarah and Clara, who both brought their expertise and insight, shaping the program into a cohesive vision that reflected his ambitions while grounding them in practicality. Their frank discussions were a far cry from the evasive conversations he'd had in the boardrooms that had once defined his career. The energy was electric, a confluence of ideas that felt meaningful, inspired, and bold. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression one of pride. "Jake, this is incredible. You've not just outlined a program, you've built a platform for change. You're stepping into a role that extends beyond your former life. There's real potential here." His heart raced as the authenticity of her words seeped in. He had stepped beyond the glittering surface of wealth into a realm where connection and impact mattered most. For the first time, he felt like the architect of his future, not just a remnant of his past. Weeks rolled by, and soon Jake found himself standing in front of a crowd, not in the plush confines of a corporate office, but in a community center, with Robert and Lucas at his side. On this warm spring afternoon, they were launching the pilot class of the skills program. I could see the excitement in the boys' faces, their hopes reflected in the nervous yet eager expressions of their peers. As he spoke, he shared not just facts and figures, but his own journey of self-discovery and how the twins had inspired him to seek purpose over profit.
The words flowed naturally, charged with the vibrancy of his message. "We're here to build skills. Yes," he declared to the audience, "but more than that, we're here to build dreams." Afterward, the applause washed over him like well-deserved acknowledgement. In that moment, as he met the spirited gaze of Robert and Lucas, he realized the importance of his transformation. He no longer sought validation through wealth or accolades, but instead through empowering others. The culmination of this journey brought more than professional success. Jake was approached afterward by a local media outlet interested in the initiative he had started. He shared his story, a narrative that resonated beyond corporate walls. He was honored not just as a businessman, but as a mentor, a figure of hope that challenged the status quo. In the subsequent months, Jake's initiative gained traction, expanding to include workshops, mentorship opportunities, and even collaborations with local businesses eager to foster the talent that had previously remained stifled in the shadows of the systemic barriers. A transformation had occurred, not just in his career trajectory, but in his identity. Jake felt an overwhelming sense of self-satisfaction as he watched Robert and Lucas step up to present their own projects, evidence that their futures were brightening, shaped by the skills and confidence he had longed to provide. His heart swelled with justified pride in the recognition that his own growth had paved the way for theirs. Through this journey, he had learned that true success lies not in the size of bank accounts, but in the echoes of genuine connections, the impact of shared knowledge, and the warmth of personal fulfillment. His transformation was complete. He had conquered his fears and emerged fortified by purpose, conviction, and a desire to foster a world where opportunity was a right, not a privilege. As he stood amid the bustling energy that filled the room with laughter and ambition, Jake knew he'd finally found his place, not as a billionaire in a cold glass tower, but as a beacon of hope for many who dared to dream. Now, everyone reading, this is your call to action. You need to subscribe now to catch the next exclusive emotional stories that push the boundaries of personal growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support these transformational narratives. Comment below your thoughts and reactions. We want to hear your theories about this extraordinary journey. And shared immediately this video with at least 5 friends who are in need of inspiration. Don't wait even one more second to make a difference in someone's life. This is the moment to show your support.